Let the meltdown begin. MMA Meltdown on the Fight Network. I am Gabriel Morency. Let's do this thing. We got a great show lined up for you this evening. The one and only Mark Pavelich will join me. We're just days away from MFC 39, No Remorse, the bombastic promoter himself. Mark Pavelich in the house. Robin Black will join me in studio. The Fight Network's very own will crunch numbers with the premier combat sport odds maker in the business, Joey Odessa from Costa Rica. We got some kick-ass videos of the week. All that and more on tonight's MMA Meltdown. MMA Meltdown on the Fight Network continues. I am Gabriel Morency, and I always enjoy talking MMA with our next guest, the polarizing and infamous Mr. Mark Pavelich, getting ready for No Remorse, which is pretty much the theme of Mark Pavelich's life, and of course a kick-ass Motorhead record as well. Mark Pavelich steps up and in. We're just days away from MFC 39. Always a pleasure, Mark. How you doing, buddy?
Thanks for having me on, brother. Appreciate it.
So, Mark, I'll tell you what, you've had your work cut out for you. This ain't your first rodeo, MFC 39, yet you've had quite a few cancellations for various reasons. Compared to past cards, how difficult has it been for you this week?
By far, out of the 14 years I've been in business, this has been the most difficult card. I'm not even joking, all wrapped up into one. But thank God, Gabe, I'm in the 1%. Right? I'm the 1% of this business, because 99% of the other promoters in this world would have packed up and said, we're canceling the show. But being the Maximum Fighting Championship and the way we do things, that's not in our DNA. That's impossible. We've never canceled a show in 14 years. And because everybody in my family has the same mentality as me. They're relentless and ruthless, and they keep going forward. So when a problem arises, we fix it. We don't make excuses. We don't tell people, oh, the fight card's better now than when it originally started.
You know, Mark, to put it in terms, it's never a routine, is it? You can't say, oh, we've done 38 of these. You can never really mail it in. And I know you personally, so I know that every card is almost like the first, isn't it? You got the butterflies. You got to make sure everything's all right, especially when it's your name, on the brand name of the company, so to speak. So I'm sure you don't take it for granted, and it probably almost reminds you of like earlier days, right? All right, we got to roll up our sleeves, get on the phone, and start working this out.
Oh, I totally agree. I look at it. I look at it in a way. It's funny because people say, "Oh, you're the biggest show. You're this, you're that." But I tell everybody, man, you're only as good as your last show. You can say whatever you want, but the end result is, MFC 38 was awesome. MFC 37 was awesome. But if these guys lay an egg on Friday night, the problem is that's what our last show is. I never feel like I'm the best or we're the best or, I don't feel that way. I feel like I always have to prove something. And I feel like that right now. I feel like on Friday night we have to prove something once again to people. We have to prove that, other shows would have canceled shows, other shows would have did this. We would have pulled a Bellator, like when they were supposed to be on pay-per-view, and then one guy gets hurt and they pull the whole pay-per-view. That's not the Pavelich family. That's not the Maximum Fighting Championship. We're relentless, man, I'm telling you. And that's the difference. That's why we will be the number 2 brand of MMA in this world one day. It will happen.
You know what I like? There's a famous quote from Mickey Mantle, and they asked Mickey, why do you play so hard every day? And the Yankees were up, and they were killing their opposition. And Mickey Mantle's like diving into walls still, and they asked him, "What are you doing? You're Mickey Mantle." And he rolled out the, it sounds cliche and cornballish, but that's why he was Mickey freaking Mantle. He said, because there's probably a kid that came to Yankee Stadium for the first time to see me play. And he goes, I don't.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, he said, I don't want to disappoint that guy. And it's the same thing.
It's funny. We come from a family my father, who was in the Hockey Hall of Fame, and I used to watch him in the summertime. My father, this is after 20 years, and I would watch my father train in the summertime. And I would ask him, after he was in the NHL, for 30-something years, but he was like the old guy on the block, and my dad would go to training camp and destroy everybody. He would kill them. And I used to ask him, and I used to say, Dad, why do you train so hard? And he said, Mark, because I want to be the best, right? And my dad was the oldest guy in training camp. The year my father retired, they brought him back to training camp, and he smoked everybody in training camp at a very old age. And he said that's it was his mindset. My Uncle Marty was the same way. Won 4 Stanley Cups with Detroit Red Wings. If you talk to him right now at 85 years old and you get him on the phone like me right now, he talks the same way as I talk. My father talks the same way. The only thing we know how to do, our family, is win. That's what we've done for many years. It's in our DNA. It comes from when we were born. We were taught that way all the way coming up. We never sat around when we lost a game and were like, oh, Dad, and start making excuses. No, you lost. That was it,
Mark Pavelich with us. Sorry, Mark, we'll get back to the card and the fighters that are on the card, and it is a quality card this Friday night in Edmonton. There was talk last week, and the MMA world on Twitter and on the internet really enjoyed the conversation, even though it seemed pretty hypothetical when the World Series of Fighting challenged Bellator to an inter-promotion pay-per-view throwdown. Bellator had no response to it, but Access TV's president, Andrew Simon, says it's something that we were very interested in. Now, of course, you fight on Access TV, and I imagine, I can't speak for you, but I imagine you as a promoter, it's something that you wouldn't want to do, and to basically work with another company like that. What do you make of these inter-promotion offers that are being thrown around right now in the past couple of weeks?
Well, Gabe, I think it's funny because I started talking about it last year. I was the one that started talking about doing stuff like that when I challenged every show on Access TV. My champions will fight the best of the best on Access TV, and we'll.
So you want the That's awesome. So you want the other Access TV guys. You want that jungle.
You think I care about World Series? Listen, you know what? I'm going to say this out loud, man, and I'm going to hurt some people's feelings. But you know what? In my industry, you got to make $1 before you can open your fat mouth. And I know for a fact that World Series hasn't made $1. Because someone injected $90 gazillion into their product and they decided to think that they're one of the bigger brands of MMA in the world, no offense to them, but the facts are the facts. They haven't made $1 in the MMA business. And until they make $1, they should shut their pie hole. Because you have to make $1 in this industry before you can step out and start cracking off on stuff.
Mark Pavelich with us. Is this stuff ever going to happen? Is there a potential of it happening? When you put it out there, your guys take it on a legacy guys or RFA. When they put it out there, how is it received?
You know what I want to do, Gabe? I called them all out on it. I haven't heard back from none of them. But they all play tough guys, even on Access TV, all those shows. You know what I told them? You get an all-star team together because not one organization could beat our champions. So you get the all-star team with the rest of Access TV, and we'll do a fight card together. And then when my guys spank their guys, they'll all get in line then, and then they can start calling me Mr. Pavelich.
Mark Pavelich on fire here this evening on MMA Meltdown. So let's talk about some of your champions. You got some championship fights coming up this Friday, including a heavyweight tilt.
Well, you look at Anthony Hamilton. Bleacher Report just reported him as top 25 prospect in the world. He's in the top 40 in the world in the heavyweight division, and he's fighting a guy, Schoonover, who just came off a win against Paul Bontello. I don't care who you are. You beat Paul Bontello, that verifies that you're a tough guy.
Yeah,
and then we have Tom Galecchio from Team Quest, fighting Kurt Southern, who's the number 1 ranked, Canadian outside the Zuffa organization in Canada. And, it wouldn't hurt the organization to have a Canadian champion once in a while. So, a lot of pressure on Southern coming up this Friday.
Yeah, there is. And would you like that? Is that, would it help the company? Would it help it? Not so much help the company as far as, dollars and cents wise, but would it help the company and help Canadian fighting by having a Canadian champ?
Gabe, our organization has always been built on the best fighters possible. And for me to say, yes, it's great to have a Canadian champion, I want to have the best fighters as champions, and that's the number one thing. But at the same time, it wouldn't hurt business if he was.
It's funny because I had Gilbert Smith on the program, Gilbert Jamal Smith, who's also on the card, taking on Jason South. And he's out there in Colorado. He was on The Ultimate Fighter, and I asked him, how do you go from Colorado to Edmonton to fight? And he had the same answer you did. He wants to fight the best guys that he can right now. And you're giving him that opportunity to do so. And he had a lot of offers from American companies.
Yeah, because people know when fighters come to us too, we promote the fighter. We don't just promote our brand, we promote the fighter. And that's something we've always been notorious for doing, and we've done it for 14 years. And we get excited about promoting guys that are going to bring it. And, I'll tell you this right now, whoever wins the fight between Gilbert Smith and Jason South, and they have to win in impressive fashion. I haven't told anybody this, but whoever wins that fight in impressive fashion, they'll be fighting for the welterweight championship come May 9th.
And, Gilbert sounds jacked up. South is a badass coming off that war with Alvey. It'll be interesting to see. So, as a promoter, you've had a lot of stress to deal with this card with fighters, but fortunately, your main card for the most part, has been untouched. So you've got the potential championship matchup lined up there. Are you concerned about weight cuts at all? Both these guys dropping down for the first time.
No, we should have probably called this show Catch Weight. It's like MFC 39 Catch Weight, because there's a few catch weights on the card, which I hate catch weights, but we had no choice. I mean, we have, Sean Powers is coming in now and against Marcus Edwards, and if you go do some research on Marcus Edwards, he's a very scary individual, and that was already replaced by Baghdad, who was the World Muay Thai champion that just got injured on Monday, which I've never heard of in the history of my organization, but that actually happened.
Mark, I've never really asked a lot from you over the years, but you've got No Remorse as the title of this card. And that's, of course, a great Motorhead record. I used to be in the metal band Homicide. And,
that's right.
We got some great song titles for you. Yeah, that's maybe, that'll be my one request to you. I'll send you the list, but, MFC 40, Malice and Forethought. Come on.
There you go.
That's not bad. Malice and Forethought.
Tickets on sale Monday.
Exactly. I got like, good 15 of them. It'd be a real feather in my cap. I
like it a lot.
I'll say that's, we came up with that one. I wanted to ask you, with the retirement of GSP, Rory McDonald sort of hit a little bit of a wall right now. Kind of wonder about the future of Canadian mixed martial arts. And as a whole, I used to tell people used to ask me, where are all these fighters going to come from in the future? And I always tell them, MMA is like the porn business. There's always going to be a girl getting off the bus in Hollywood from Iowa that's willing to do whatever it takes to become a star. And you're always going to find some tough kid from a farm, be it in Manitoba, be it in Iowa, some badass from Colorado. There's always going to be somebody out there that wants to fight because that's what he does and that's who he is. But I wonder about the talent base and the future of mixed martial arts and where the athlete's going to come from, especially with wrestling programs being scaled back and being killed like they are. As a promoter and someone who's been in the industry for a while that looks at the talent pool, what's the talent pool of younger fighters like right now?
I think it's really good, Gabe, because the difference is now that I'm noticing is that there's kids now coming up the ranks that actually train in mixed martial arts. They don't go to school anymore. They don't go to martial arts schools anymore and just go, I'm doing judo, I'm doing taekwondo, I'm doing karate. They go to school now and they take mixed martial art classes. And that's what's making the difference now. You actually have kids now that are coming. I get videos sent to me all the time, some 15-year-old kid that's doing stuff in the gym that you just shake your head going, that kid's 15? And it's the same thing back in the day. When you look at baseball and they hear that kid that's pitching out in some town in some rural town in Texas, and he's throwing a 90-mile-an-hour fastball at 16 years old. Well, the same thing is happening in mixed martial arts. There's kids now that are they're just it's unbelievable. I got some of the tapes. Some kids sending me tapes at 16 years old. Doing focus pads, talking to me while he's hitting the pads, not even looking at the pads, and then he's got very high-level wrestling already, very high-level jiu-jitsu already, high-level boxing already. He's 16 years old.
And, we've seen the influx of the gyms, right? And a lot of former fighters and active fighters with their gyms. And it does seem as if, though, there's a couple of guys in each city in the country, isn't there?
Yes, there is. And you'll see, there's going to be more of that. There's going to be more kids. When I walk around all the time, I tell parents, listen, it's great that you want your kid to play hockey, and that's really cool because I know that's the big sport in our country and all the rest of that stuff. But your kid is better off taking martial arts than he is playing hockey. And the reason being is that what he'll learn, hockey will stop. He'll end up in some beer league one day. He'll spend $1 million getting him there, and he'll play in some beer league. With mixed martial arts, at least he'll have a craft once he's done it, regardless if he fights in the Maximum Fighting Championship, the UFC, whatever the case may be. But he's got a legitimate craft that he can use in his life one day, or her life. And that's something that I instill all parents to do, is get your kid in martial arts.
And it doesn't sound so insane, especially now. And like you, Mark, as you know, my grandfather played for the Montreal Canadiens, was a linesman as well. I've got relatives that played in the NHL. So, I grew up in that hockey culture, but it's different now. Hockey's such an expensive sport for kids.
I think
like a culture.
In general is not that expensive on the grand scheme of things. Yeah. When you look at it comparably speaking to hockey. I don't have a knock on hockey. I just think that parents should really instill their children. Listen, I started martial arts very old in my day because my parents instilled into me to play hockey, right? And at the same time as I took martial arts, and I knew I started my children off at a young age in martial arts, and I saw how it helped them in their everyday endeavors, not even with nothing to do with fighting, just the way they conduct themselves. I think martial arts kind of streamlines people into, hey, you got to act a certain way, and you don't get out of line when you don't need to get out of line, and then when necessary to do something, you'll be prepared to do so.
Mark Pavelich, MFC 39 this Friday. Mark, it's always a pleasure. I always enjoy catching up with you. We'll let you get back to work. I know you've had your work cut out this week. I look forward to the card. Some exciting fights this Friday.
Well, like I tell everybody, if you're in the Edmonton area, get to Ticketmaster.ca, check out our website, but tune in, everybody. I guarantee it. Half the card's going to the hospital, half the card's going to the after party.
There it is, Mark Pavelich with us. It's always a pleasure breaking it down with Mark Pavelich. I think my favorite part when I asked him about what do you think about Access TV versus World Series of Fighting, and the president of Access TV, not Cuban, but the president of the fighting division, Andrew Simon, his thought was, we'll take all of our companies and match it up. We'll take a couple of fighters from MFC, a couple of fighters from Legacy, RFA, etc. I couldn't help but, if I was drinking coffee, I would have spit it out when Pavelich said, no, screw that. I want to take on the other Access TV promotions. Say what you will about Pavelich, but, the dude is brutally honest, whether you like it or hate it. Great stuff as always. Robin Black's going to join us from the Fight Network. I always enjoy kicking it with Mr. Black, as well as Joey Odessa. All that and more. MMA Meltdown continues. MMA Meltdown on the Fight Network continues. I am Gabriel Morency. Thanks to the bombastic Mark Pavelich for joining us. We go from Mark Pavelich to Mr. Robin Black, the Fight Network's very own. Always a pleasure, Robin. How you doing, brother?
Oh, good, man. Doing good today.
So, Robin, I tell you, I always look forward to speaking to Pavelich.
Yeah, me too.
This business can wear you out, and it can be a grind, but, Pavelich is always going to be entertaining. He was a little bit more entertaining than usual this week, as he's all stressed out. He's talking a million miles an hour. He's had quite a few cancellations, but he says he's salvaged the cancellations for his card this Friday.
Yeah, by the time there's a nuclear war and everything is gone, there'll be cockroaches and Mark Pavelich. You can't destroy this guy. You can't stop him. You can't end him. If something, what it takes in this business at this, sort of upper mid-developmental level, anywhere beneath the UFC, basically, where all the good stuff is going on, it takes those guys who just can't be beat. All of your fight card got canceled and you got 12 hours to do it? Well, Mark Pavelich would make a fight card.
Well, that's exactly what he stated. That it's not the Pavelich thing to do to cancel a card.
Yeah, he's right. He's right, man. And I manage a couple of guys. I got a guy who's on the Ultimate Fighter coming out Wednesday, Canada versus Australia, that I manage, and he, we brought him up through the ranks. And I manage another guy that was in the UFC, Nick Denis, and now I got a few guys kind of under there. I don't know why I get involved with this kind of business. Analyzing fighting seems to pay my bills. It's fun. I love it. I'm good at it. You know, it's all one of the only things I've ever really been kind of good at. And I like doing it, but for some reason I can't stay out of that business. But man, it sucks. Like, it's a terrible business. There's like the worst, dumbest people in the world running some of these shows. You would not believe it. Guys,
I would believe it. I don't know how you do it. And you and I have a lot in common, as you know, we've both been in the music industry.
Yeah.
So we've dealt with shady promoters, club owners, executives, etc. And it's crazy to say, but this is actually a sleazier business than the music business. Would you agree with that assessment?
I would agree with that assessment.
It sounds crazy to say.
I know.
Except, you know, for the fine folks here at the Fight Network.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
It's great people.
Here's the thing.
Everyone else, it's low lives.
It is, I would agree with that assessment 100%.
Not just low life, that's not the best way to put it. But just sort of insane, unprofessional, crazy.
For sure, for sure. Like, okay, in music, maybe 20 or 30 years ago, or in movies 20 years ago, there were people like are in fighting now. People who were like, I don't know anything about movies or music.
Good way of putting it, right?
But I want to be in this business because I think that's where all the girls are, all the drugs is, all the fun is, whatever. They're like, I got to be like Dana White. 30 years ago in music, people were like, I'm going to be a music producer. 20 years ago in movies, I'm going to produce movies. Those low lives are now thinking that they're going to put on fight cards. There are good people too. There are people that figure it out, make no money and do it out of love. But there's also these sleazy wannabes that just sit there and try to figure out how to try to be like Dana White, because that looks like fun. And it's not fun. Dana White's like falling apart from exhaustion, 80 hours a week of pressure and stress, and running one of the biggest organizations
I wonder how much
in the world.
longer Dana, and you know, talking about like Mark Pavelich, it's the type of personality that you need.
100%.
Yeah, you got to have, they're thin-skinned, but thick-skinned at the same time. You know what I mean? Like, they can handle it, but then they also get the grudge.
Yeah.
And it's almost their strength and weakness, because that stuff motivates them.
For sure.
You know, the hate that people have on them sort of is the gasoline to keep them going. You know, I'll never stop. I'll never stop. You got to wonder at some point, because as you stated, Dana White's not a happy guy. You know, he's not happy.
He's overworked at the very least.
At the end of the day, and I know he's got water slides and he's driving, you know, Ferraris, etc. in Vegas. But at the end of the day, the guy's playing blackjack, looking pretty depressed in Vegas at the end of the night.
For sure, man.
He's at the table, and you know what's going through his head. And it's probably just like randomness, right? He's playing, and he's probably like, Brock Lesnar.
Singapore.
Fedor, Singapore, Macau, lawsuit. Like, you know, it's just like buzzwords popping in the guy's head all day, right?
Man, those guys, it's the one thing that a promoter, a good, successful promoter, does have in common with a fighter is ultra competitiveness, the desire to crush all others, you know, like to be better than everybody, to prove it to everybody. And those are the guys that can make it. Dana White's one of those guys. The reason that any of us have jobs, anyone's talking about fighting, anybody is fighting in any kind of other league, is all because this guy is so competitive, and he wants this fighting thing to be the biggest sport in the world. And a guy like that.
And he had the Fertitas money.
But he had to make them believe. He had to make those guys believe that this was going to work. Because a lot of people go talk to billionaires and they're like, hey, man, I got this great idea. I'm going to run a dog show. We're going to sell. We're going to get dogs and people are going to do it. And they'll be like, no, that's stupid. That'll never work. But he made those guys believe. You know?
I was going to make a cheap affliction joke right there. And that's a classic example, actually, though. Oscar De La Hoya, Tom Intesio, Donald Trump. Donald Trump's got money. He's kicked around MMA a couple of times. And even Trump, the lowest of the low, Robin, the lowest of the low, you know, said, I can't really make money. I can't make money off of this. Which shows how damn hard it is to make money in this industry.
There's no money being made, man. Outside,
there's no money
UFC,
on this side, on that side. There's no money in the cage.
The UFC is making money. The top performers, George St. Pierre's made lots of money. Anderson Silva's made lots of money. But man, all these
the UFC have 400. I think there's 403 or whatever the number is.
It's gone up.
It's probably actually 4,000. Excuse me, 400.
Everybody's
they got 4,000 fighters under contract. But let's say they got 400 fighters under contract. How many are making, we say, good money? 15?
How many are making $500,000 a year?
Yeah. 20 of them?
Yeah, maybe. But I would suspect into that range you could be getting into 30 and 40 now. It should maybe be 10% of them. Yeah.
Which isn't a high number, is it?
It's a challenge, but now everybody's in the UFC. So at one time, let's say you had to be one of the 40 best athletes in the world to make that kind of money. Now you can be number 437. You're not going to make that money, and neither do you deserve to yet. But at least you're in the game where you get paid something to try to chase that down. If you're a rock band, we're talking about music, you're a rock band, and you're rock band number 437, you get $100 to play down at the bar on the weekend, and you don't get to be on television. You don't get any of these things. What I always want the fighters to get paid more money. I fought, and most of my friends are in the business, and I want these guys to get paid more money. But a guy number 430, if he was indie rock band number 430, he doesn't have any of the opportunities that these guys have.
But a lot of times, guys can make more money not in the UFC.
Yeah.
Which, if I was a manager, and I use Jay Huron as a classic example of this. Jay Huron made $100,000 in Bellator winning the tournament. Made another $50K to fight Askren.
Yeah.
And, you know, did he win? Some people think it was pretty damn close.
I'm sure he made 30 grand fighting for Affliction, knocked out Jason High in like a minute and a half.
So,
you know,
he wants, exactly, and he wanted the instant rematch with Askren. He didn't want to go through the tournament. He goes back to the UFC. He got $13,000 to fight Jake Ellenberger.
Yeah.
Ellenberger knocked him out.
Yeah.
He fought Tyrone Woodley. He got $6,000. Jay freaking Huron got $6,000 in his last UFC fight. I know because I know his manager. He got $6,000, got knocked out, got released.
Yeah.
You're better off making a $250K a year in Bellator.
Well, let's use that rock band thing as an example again. You got rock band on indie label and he's making $8 a record and they sell 5,000, that's 40 grand. Or you come over here and you're going to play in the big leagues. Now you're going to go for it. You're going to try to be on MTV. You get 20 cents a record, and you owe them $1 million on the making of the record.
How about the band Moist?
Yeah.
The Canadian rock band Moist.
Yep.
Smart dudes. I was never a huge fan of their music. A little girlish for my liking.
I was cool with it.
Yeah, he probably knows them. He's Mr. Rockstar over here.
Dave's a good dude.
Yeah, of course he is. You know what I mean? So my whole point is, though, they kept the money.
Yeah.
And I remember, him saying, actually, we could have spent the money on a video, try to get it on MTV.
Yeah.
And it's like crying in the ocean, right? Yep. Keep the money, be the big stars in Canada. Keep the money.
Yeah, but that's
keep the money. Don't throw the money, right?
That's the Jay Huron comparison.
But Jay Huron jumped into the UFC.
Yep.
Oh, the UFC.
Yep.
You made $19,000 in 6 months and got fired.
But you're rolling the dice on maybe, just maybe, if you make it work, you can still dream of the GSP money. So that's
exactly what it is. And I had this conversation. They were kind of behind the scenes here about David Loiseau.
Yeah.
So I did a live show in Montreal. And, we had for us, Hobby's little brother on, Eamon. Badass fighter, right?
Yeah.
So I was talking to him, and we were talking about Loiseau. And Loiseau's there. Loiseau is like looking into the camera, Dana White.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
This guy. Yeah.
I'm ready to go. I want to fight. And, I basically asked David point blank. I said, why don't you sign with Titan or MFC? Why don't you, No, UFC, and, once you fought in the UFC, you want to go back. So then I asked his friends after, like, Loiseau's gone, and we're sitting at the table. And I said, what is it with Dave? I said, why doesn't he just take the $15K and go fight there?
Yeah.
And Eamon, he goes, man, because of the dream.
Yeah.
It's exactly what you just said, Rob. You said because of the dream.
It is.
He said, you can't tell a man that he's not going to be on top anymore.
For sure.
I figure, though, I'm a realist. Like, you as a fighter were a realist, right?
I was.
Like, you didn't say to yourself, no, I'm going to be in the UFC. You wanted to fight regionally.
I was 39 years old, and I was not getting to the UFC when I started fighting. That was not going to happen. Would it have been beautiful?
Everybody else does now. But you make yourself short.
But, now, I'll tell you, I could beat Royston Wee or whatever. I could 100% beat that guy. Once you get to the point that a 4-5, 44-year-old fighter on the lowest level of the Canadian scene is looking at a guy in the UFC in in Singapore and saying I would beat that guy, and I'm a realist.
Like, you're a realist. You're not drunk in a bar.
Exactly.
It's not like
I know that every other UFC guy would smash me. So I'm not some crazy guy. I analytically, as a fight analyst, looked at that guy and said, I think I'd beat that guy. I think I could have him out of there in 10 minutes. That changes the perception of what it is for a UFC fighter. When a barely, not even 500 fighter on the lowest level in Canada in his 40s could probably beat that guy, that is changing things for sure.
Robin Black from the Fight Network. So, Robin, we got to get out of here. But MFC 39 this Friday. He shuffled a lot of things, and when it's all said and done, looks like he's got a quality card.
Yeah, and Access TV puts on unbelievable. Their production's amazing. Mark comes through every time, and no matter what happens in advance, an MFC card is always good.
And it'll be interesting to see what happens with the Access TV challenge to the World Series of Fighting, because it's going to suck if all these promotions act like douchebags, like they're cooler than the other one. So, World Series of Fighting really didn't have any business calling out Bellator, but they did. And now, they take Bellator doesn't say anything, but World Series of Fighting puffed out. Well, we challenged, we challenged them and they didn't say anything. So now if Access TV does the same thing to World Series of Fighting, you better accept it. You can't turn around and go, well, we're too cool for you, right? Yeah. Because then we're right back where we started with a bunch of jerk-off promoters just spouting their mouths.
In the end, if you're not the UFC, none of this matters anywhere. You got Brock Lesnar standing in the schoolyard flexing, that's the UFC. Then you got 3 little grade 10 students trying to act like who's tougher. It's kind of irrelevant.
Yeah, and I think even 3 little grade 10 students would probably lose to Lesnar, but that's besides the point. Robin, it's always a pleasure. Time goes by too fast.
Yeah, it does, man.
All right, we'll get to our videos of the week and Joey Odessa. MMA Meltdown on the Fight Network continues. Thanks to Mark Pavelich and Robin Black for joining us. We've got Joey Odessa, the premier combat sport odds maker in the business, set to join us in a couple of moments' time. But first, let's get to our videos of the week. We got a lot of videos this week to get to. So let's start off with a great spinning back fist knockout. But what makes this so cool is the fact that the guy is 62 years old. He's 62. And I think you'll be able to tell which one's 62. Look at this guy. He looks like a cross between George Carlin and Tommy Chong.
Give it up for the blue corner, ladies and gentlemen. Give it up for the red corner.
And Robin Black was saying he's too old at 39. This guy's 62. 62. Some quality stuff. Maybe it's not too late for me. But every time I think about going to a gym, I'm always worried that this is going to happen to me. Hey, what the hell was that? That's reason 1,326 as to why Russians are tougher than us, because that's a lawsuit in North America. Yeah, I went to the local MMA gym and the guy just punched me in the mouth. Like, what are you teaching the guy there? Keep your hands up. I guess that's the moral. Like, of course that's Russia, where they just sort of everyone chuckles at him and then they roll him over. Next. All right, speaking of Russia, here's a nice cartwheel KO from Russia. Pretty impressive shot right there. All right, so Conor McGregor, the Irish sensation Conor McGregor, he's almost, he rubs a lot of people the wrong way because of the publicity and hype that he gets. And a lot of people say he hasn't earned it. And, everyone's calling out Conor McGregor because, he's that it guy right now. But looking at McGregor training right now, I don't know. I think he's got to raise it up a notch and get some better training partners because he's not looking too good here. We always knew McGregor's ground game was his weakness. Yeah, come on, Connor. Don't let people see your weakness out there. I guess it really is hard to find training partners in Ireland. They're not kidding. All right, speaking of not kidding, we broadcast this show out of Toronto, and there's a lot of Toronto Maple Leaf fans in the building and, of course, in the city. Last year, the season was strike shortened, so Leaf fans thought their team was better than they actually are. They're back to reality this year, which is just sort of average. Yet Leaf fans are panicking. Oh, who's the goalie? We should fire the coach. And they're going to pretty extreme measures in their displeasure with the hockey club.
Doug's gonna put a nail through my nose. It's already been prior pierced. I'm thinking he's gonna do it. Yeah, motherfucker, we're gonna give her a shot, motherfucker. There we go. Yeah, look, right there. Can you see that? Look at that, Doug.
You're gonna do it. You're gonna never.
What's up, man? Should my snout out of that? Yeah. Is that it? I'm good, motherfucker.
Why? Why would you do this?
I get beat, motherfucker up, motherfucker. I get beat, motherfucker.
Well, that's what the rest of the country thinks the average Leaf fan is like, evidently. If you catch, the dude is wearing a Toronto Maple Leaf hat. And, you know, we get a lot of videos from Russia, but there's some fine old Canadiana right there. First off, who does that? Second off, who's got a freaking half-cut log? And you know, these dudes are just hammered. Absolutely hammered, literally and figuratively. Speaking of hammered, Joey Odessa likes to hammer the books. He'll join us next. Man, this program has really flown by this evening, but good thing we've saved a couple of minutes for our main man in Costa Rica, the premier combat sport odds maker in the business, MMA, squared circle, and everything else in between, including wrestling. Joey Odessa joins us. Joey, it's always a pleasure. How you doing?
Hey, what's happening tonight, Jake?
We're doing all right, Joey. Unfortunately, due to the airing of this program, due to the scheduling of the program, we'll bypass UFC Fight Night. And, you know, a lot of people will say, oh, it's a quiet weekend, but it really isn't a quiet weekend. We got World Series of Fighting, and we've got MFC on Friday night. You've been setting numbers for the MFC. We had Mark Pavelich on the program earlier tonight, Joey, and, you know, there's been a lot of talk about the inter-promotional fights. You and I last week talked about the potential World Series of Fighting versus Bellator matchups, and now with Bellator not responding, Axis TV, Mark Cuban and company said, hey, we'll take on World Series of Fighting if you guys want to. And Mark Pavelich said until the World Series of Fighting makes $1 in profit, they should keep their big fat mouths shut.
Well, you got to figure Bellator might be running out of fighters. It seems that, you know, it started back with Cole Conrad, and he showed some, you know, he left the organization, and he was the heavyweight champ, so something wasn't right there. And then you got King Mo that's got to go in the tournament. Now you got Kern getting a rematch. I mean, we could sit here and split hairs about it, but Pavelich is right. You know what? Until somebody makes some money, you know, Pavelich is not in competition with anybody, and he shouldn't be in competition for well-being. If they put their money up and they take some risk on the other side, that's fine, but it doesn't look like that's what these guys are looking to do. It looks like they're looking to build off of other organizations, which we've seen many organizations do in the past, and Bellator trying to, you know, crunch down on the UFC with their nonsense is the same kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, riding the coattails happens in every business.
Yeah, it does. That's a good way of putting it, actually, Joey. And you know, you mentioned Bellator and Kern and Strauss, and let's call it out for what it is. There's been a public perception out there with diehard fight fans that follow Pat Kern and Rebney and Bellator, etc., that Kern's the company guy. You know, he's from Chicago. He always gets the close decisions. He always gets the big fights. And he's a good fighter. He's a hell of a fighter, but there's been that perception there, Joey, that he's the company guy. And now that perception becomes a reality to many when Curran gets the rematch against Strauss right now, in which a lot of people say, hey, you guys have a tournament, no exceptions. The tournament is the tournament. Go back into the tournament, like everybody else. And Daniel Strauss says, hey, I'll fight who they tell me to fight, but this is a little bit strange. I thought that he had to earn it. And meanwhile, Ferreri's not too impressed right now. He's so pissed off, he wants out of Bellator, Joey.
Like I said, I mean, it started back with Conrad. I mean, some of these guys, Alvarez looked to get out, and then, Alvarez turned around, beat Chandler in the rematch. I mean, I imagine somebody over there is making money because, I mean, you don't go into business to break even. You don't go into business to lose money unless you have a bigger plan on the horizon. And so somebody at Bellator is making some loot, whether it's our job to keep track of their wallets. I don't think so. But I think this current thing, if you're going to put King Mo in a tournament and make him fight his way back to the top after getting caught with a spinning back fist, granted, props to Manuel Newton for winning the rematch. But if you're going to put a guy like Mo back in the tournament, put Pat Curran back in the tournament. You know what I mean? I mean, Mo's, it's the same thing. If that's how it works and they wanted Fuji to go back in the tournament, then put him back in the tournament, because what happened with Fuji and Zola years ago, I'm still not over.
Well, look, that's why Jay Hiron wanted out of Bellator, because he didn't get the instant rematch against Askren. Ironically enough, they're both gone now. But he didn't want to go back into the tournament. He wanted the rematch. And if I was advising him, I would have said, hey, just go in the damn tournament, win it again, make another $100K. It's decent money to go through these tournaments. And that's the thing with Bellator. We don't want to see the same fights over. Alvarez and Chandler was kind of an exception. But once you make that exception, Joey, then it becomes the rule.
But look at what those guys would have done. Those guys are UFC caliber, obviously. And I look at them and I say, look at the money that they might have left on the table with the UFC because of contracts. I mean, nobody puts a gun to anybody's head to sign a contract, but there's better opportunities on the horizon. And I think that the organizations that work with the UFC, I mean, look, Ryan Gimo, I'm fairly certain was a good draw in Canada. And Mark let him move on. And that was, I think, I don't know the circumstances of it, so I probably shouldn't be talking about it, but I think it was an honorable thing to do if he did let him go on his own.
Yeah, and Jimmo goes on. Douglas Lima, a lot of former MFC guys out there. So you set numbers for the last MFC, and the quality of the cards have been pretty good. There's been a good buzz about the MFC, 37, 38, going into 39 here. Before we get to a quick hint of the World Series of Fighting this weekend, Joey, going to be making numbers on the main event. Hamilton, big favorite. Always risky when you're talking about heavyweights because Schoonhauer's got heavy hands, Joey, but Hamilton's got to win this fight.
Yeah, I mean, he's coming off a layoff, too. I mean, he's a UFC veteran. He's got some losses, but that's the thing about, losses. These guys all they got to do is go on a little run. I mean, Hamilton, Hamilton's going to be a favorite in this fight. How high of a favorite? 3-1, 4-1. I mean, he's the favorite in the fight. He's expected to win the fight, and I'd be shocked if he didn't win the fight. But these things happen, and that's what happens with competitive matchmaking. You might not see the huge names in the MFC, but you will see competitive matchmaking. That's why you'll see 3 or 4 losses on a guy's record. And those losses, while I say losses are, winning and losing, that's what it's all about. You're in there to win and, do as good as you can, and in the end, it's a business. I mean, you can't blame Curran for dropping back to Bellator. You can't blame Curran for trying to make the money if they're going to pay him to be the houseboy. But, at the same time over in the MFC, these guys, 3 or 4 wins, they might get a shot somewhere else. They might get bigger money at the MFC. I mean, you're just, have it going back years ago. Look, you can reinvent yourself. Robbie Lawler, Vitor Belfort, Carlos Condit. These are guys that had losses on their record. They mean nothing.
Matt Brown.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a long list. Pat Healy. You can go down the list. It's almost the new trend in MMA, actually, Joey. The vets, guys in there. It seems, Joey, that 2 things can happen. And we only got a couple of minutes here. We got to get out. But guys, when they get to that 30 years old range, they either sort of break and get worn down and want out, or they just sort of, nothing matters. I don't care that I lost. I'm going to go in there and fight aggressively. I'm not fighting not to lose anymore. They sort of, they just become smarter fighters. So let's wrap it up with the World Series of Fighting.
Gabe, let me just say one quick thing in there, and it's never quick, but emotional maturity, man.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it is with these guys. They realize that it's not all about, I'd rather be I'm quoting someone that said, I'd rather be partners with someone that's greedy for money than somebody that's greedy for fame. Because what can you buy with fame? I mean, you want to be Casey Anthony famous, or do you want to be George St. Pierre famous?
Yeah,
They're both famous.
Krusty the Clown said it best when he told Bart Simpson, what good is fame if you don't have the moolah to back it up? And Krusty the Clown is never wrong, Joey. So what about emotional and mental maturity for Mike Kyle and Anthony Johnson, two guys that have been around forever? I like Johnson to beat Kyle in this fight.
He's supposed to. Kyle's tough. Look, Kyle's capable on any given day, but he just seems to, he's got a lot of hiccups. He's a tough kid, though. I mean, look, he gets hit by the best of them over there at AKA.
Yeah.
I mean, he's in
but
there.
That might be his problem.
I mean, that's a dungeon.
That might be his problem, Joey, because, he trains with AKA. But if you're the guy getting pounded on, it's like Joey Beltran. What did Baroni and Kane say about Beltran? Nobody can take a shot like Beltran. So Beltran's just getting drilled in there. Does it really help him?
It's like that guy in $1 Million Baby, Lightning. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just gets beat up, takes a lick, and keeps on ticking, but he keeps the bucket, like a champ.
Yeah, exactly. He's in that gym. Yeah, he gets beat up in that gym all the time. But anyways, we got to wrap it up. And remember, you want unfiltered, uncensored, and a longer edition of Joey Odessa's segment, tune into MMA Meltdown Radio every Tuesday night, 10 o'clock Eastern, and we broke down all the fights for the Wednesday fight night. But if you tune in, you already know that. Channel 167, SiriusXM, SiriusXM.ca. Always a pleasure, Joey.
Hey, my pleasure, G. Have a good one.
There's a Joey Odessa with us. I wish we had more time, but we don't. MMA Meltdown continues. Well, the bell has rung, and we are done. Thanks to Mark Pavelich for joining me. Wish him and all the fighters the best of luck. MFC 39 this Friday night in Edmonton. Always a pleasure breaking it down with Robin Black. Always a great time when he joins me in studio. Joey Odessa, the best in the business from Costa Rica. Shout out to everyone here at the Fight Network for a job well done. We hope you enjoyed UFC Fight Night. And don't forget, we still have the MFC and the World Series of Fighting to go down later in the week. We'll recap and break it all down next week on MMA Meltdown. Other than that, you're on your own. Later.